Drew Brees is a Hall of Fame quarterback that played his career from 2001 to 2020. He is well known, of course, with his time with the Saints. However, he originally started off as a Charger, and after a few years, he was let go in free agency, and of course he went to the Saints. But the Saints were not his only place he could have gone. There was another team that was interested in getting him, and that was the Dolphins. However, the team doctors didn't think he would recover from his torn rotator cuff injury, so they recommended not signing him. Well, he ended up going to the Saints and becoming a Hall of Famer. But what if instead the Dolphins still managed to sign him? How much would that change the both for the Saints and the Dolphins? We're about to find out. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if? An NFL theory. So it all begins, of course, in the 2006 offseason, where Brees, instead of signing with the Saints, he now signs with the Dolphins. So now this opens up a lot of different scenarios. The first thing is, what are the Saints going to do now that they don't have Brees? Well, I think the answer is pretty obvious. They would now draft Vince Young in the 2006 draft. But now, the question is, what happens to the Titans, since they can't get Young now? Welp, I think they'll still instead keep Steve McNair and not trade him to the Ravens. The Ravens still have Kyle Bowler, so they'll be fine. But then it opens up another question still. What now happens to Dante Culpepper? Because remember, he was traded to the Dolphins in that offseason. But now that the Saints have Brees, they have no reason to trade for Culpepper. I think instead he would be traded to the Raiders, who need a QB really badly. So now let's get to the 2006 season. So the 2006 season begins with Brees on the Dolphins. As, of course, in 2006, the Dolphins were considered a Super Bowl contender, and with Brees there, he would really make them supercharged. However, the team would struggle early on because the Dolphins were not really that good in 2006. Brees would still keep them alive, though, for most of the year. But instead of this massive improvement, they ended up once again going 9-7, which, hey, better than going 6-10 like they did in real life. Meanwhile, for the Saints, with Vince Young, the team would have a big improvement. However, without Brees, they don't make the big improvement that they really need, as instead, they finish 8-8. Meanwhile, the Titans would finish 7-9 instead of 8-8, and the Raiders with Culpepper do not change whatsoever. So in the updated 2006 standings in the NFC, the Eagles move up to the number 2 seed, Seahawks move up to the 3rd seed, the Panthers win the NFC South as the 4th seed, and the AFC, the Colts now have the number 2 seed, the Patriots move up to the 3 seed, the Ravens fall down to the 4th seed, the Dolphins will now make the playoffs with the 5th seed. So we start in the wild card round with the Dolphins visiting the Ravens. Second time the Dolphins played the Ravens in the playoffs in a row. So Drew Brees' first playoff game with the Dolphins, as he had to go up against the number 1 defense in 2006. And of course, remember, the Ravens did destroy the Saints earlier in the year. However, these Dolphins have a little bit more defense on their side, and I fully don't trust the Ravens with Bowler, especially seeing how they played against the Colts in real life. So I actually think Brees will go up to Baltimore and actually stun the Ravens, which then sets him up at the Chargers. After beating the number 1 defense, they're got to face the number 1 offense in the league, as it would be a tough fight back and forth, but I think with the firepower the Chargers had, I think they would still win in the end. Then, of course, we're back to my last theory recently I did with Peyton and Brady swapping teams. And, of course, in that one, Colts would visit the Chargers in the AFC Championship. I think the Chargers would win, which sets the Super Bowl up with the Chargers at the Bears. And as I said in that previous theory, I think the Chargers would win this one. Now we're in 2007 after a really successful year the Saints, the Dolphins had the previous year. They once again had Super Bowl aspirations. However, of course, this is 2007 we're talking about, so the Dolphins have a major step back, especially when Drew Brees, the first 4 games of the year, throws 1 touchdown to 9 interceptions. My goodness. The Dolphins struggle big time. While they're not going to be 1-15 like they were, they're going to go all the way down to 4-12. Just ugly performance. Speaking of ugly, oh boy, the Saints would have a massive implosion. That implosion that they had with Brees at the beginning, it would be amplified with Vince Young playing horribly, as the Saints really bottom out as they once again finish 3-13 like they did 2 years earlier. And of course the Titans would just middle along as they go 9-7. So in the updated 2007 stands, in the NFC, the Redskins move up to the 5th seed and the Giants fall to the 6th seed. And in the NFC, it's the Browns that win the AFC North as the 4th seed. And with the Giants out of the way, since they would lose to Seahawks in my eyes, the Super Bowl would now be the Cowboys and Patriots, as the Patriots are one step away from trying to go undefeated, but they're going to have to go up against a powerhouse Cowboys team. This game I actually had to go back and forth on deciding who would win, because originally I had in mind that the Cowboys would win, because after all, the Patriots did not play good in the Super Bowl. Because remember, they faced the Giants, and the Cowboys have an even better defense than the Patriots, I think, that year. And they're going to have the better QB in Tony Romo, too, so I thought the Cowboys probably would win this. But I got to also remember, too, that they choke as well in the playoffs. And, of course, the Patriots pretty much spanked them earlier on in the year. So it was kind of like, it could go either way. I had to really think about it and such, and I eventually decided I'm going to have the Patriots win it this time around. Now, before we begin the 2008 season, we got something that's a little bit of a problem now. That is Chad Pennington. Of course, in this timeline, the Jets still get Favre, so now Chad Pennington is expendable. Now, in real life, of course, he went to the Dolphins. But why would he go to the Dolphins now when they have Brees? So, had to look around where he would go to, and I thought there was one team that would be perfect for him. A team that absolutely needs a quarterback, and that, of course, is the Vikings. Of course, also to fill in a slot, so there we go. So after the horrendous 2007 season, the Dolphins under new management have a massive season. Drew Brees has one of the best seasons of his career at the moment, and he, of course, passes for 5,000 yards. The first QB since Dan Marino to do it. Hey, Dolphins can go the only quarterbacks with 5,000 yards from the same team. And, of course, they still will probably implement the Wildcat offense, because why not? And with this massive improvement, plus their defense being really good, the Dolphins have a major turnaround, just like they did in real life, as they go 13-3. And the Saints, oh God. Man, I bet they wish they had Brees now, as with Vince Young, it's just not looking good as they once again go 3-13. Meanwhile, for the Vikings with Chad Pennington now, they have a nice good year, especially with better quarterback play than Tavares Jackson, as they went 11-5. So in the updated 2008 standings, in the NFC, it's the Buccaneers that make the playoffs as the 6th seed, and the AFC major changes as the Dolphins now have the number 1 seed, the Titans fall to the 2 seed, the Steelers fall to the 3rd seed. So we take a look at the divisional round as the Chargers, after beating the Colts, now instead visit the number 1 seed Dolphins. The second time Brees faces his former team, and he'll try and get his revenge from his loss 2 years ago. And the Chargers will put up a good fight as a 9-7 team, but the Dolphins this time around with Brees are just way too good, and the Dolphins will beat them to make the conference championship for the first time since 1992, where they will now host the Steelers. Number 1 and number 3 seed going up against the number 1 defense as well. The Steelers are going to have a very tough time, though, as Drew Brees will be very difficult to beat. Plus, Big Ben is going to have a tough time against that really good Dolphins defense. And with Brees there, I think the Dolphins are going to do it. They will knock off the Steelers to make the Super Bowl for the first time since 1984. So the Super Bowl is now the Dolphins and the Cardinals. And I'm sure the Dolphins would have somewhat of an advantage, too, since Tampa is not that far away from Miami. Be a lot of Dolphins fans there, as this would be one hell of a matchup. It would also be a rematch from Week 2. Remember when the Cardinals destroyed the Dolphins in that game? It would be probably a high-scoring game between two of the best offenses in the league. But just like in the real-life Super Bowl, with the Dolphins having the better defense, I think they're going to pull it off to get their first title in 35 years. But now, before we begin 2009, we got another thing we have to worry about now. Favre. As of course, in real life, after he retired from the 2008 season on the Jets, he went on to sign with the Vikings. But why would the Vikings want him if they have Chad Pennington? Now, I know he wanted to go back to the NFC North and get revenge on the Packers, but There's no team in the NFC North that would want him other than the Vikings, so he's screwed in that regard. So what's he going to do when he comes back? Well, as the picture shows right here, I think there's a very obvious place to put him. The Titans. They went 13-3 the year before. All they need is a quarterback who could take them to the next step. Plus, they need a new QB after having Kerry Collins the last year after McNair retired in 2007. And to fill up an extra slot, I think it would be perfect to send him to the Titans for right now. So after winning the Super Bowl the previous years, the Dolphins look forward to repeat, and Brees once again has an incredible season. The Dolphins had another really good defense. They didn't have to rely on their Wildcat this time around, but it didn't matter as they exploded on the scene with a 14-2 record. Meanwhile, for the Saints, in a really do-or-die year for Vince Young, they finally have a nice bounce year. After going 2 straight 3-13s, they go 9-7. The Vikings, meanwhile, without Favre, Chad Pennington was horrible, and then he suffered a season-ending injury earlier on in the year. So the Vikings, back to DeVaris Jackson, would have a major regression as they finished 8-8. Meanwhile, the Titans with Favre, he would have an amazing year. Titans offense would be good, but remember, they struggled, especially at 0-6 start they had early in the year. I doubt they'll do that bad under Favre, but they're going to have some troubles throughout most of the year still, as they are going to actually regress to 9-7. So in the updated 2009 stands in the NFC, it's the Packers that now have the number 1 seed, as the Eagles win the NFC East and they move up to the number 2 seed. The Cardinals move up to the 3 seed. The Falcons make the playoffs with the 4th seed. The Cowboys fall to the 5th seed, and the 49ers will make the playoffs as the 6th seed. And the AFC, it's the Dolphins now with the number 1 seed. The Colts are the 2nd seed. The Chargers fall to the 3rd seed. The Patriots fall to the 6th seed. So in the AFC side of the divisional round, the Patriots, after they beat the Bengals, visit the number 1 seed Dolphins. First time Brady and Brees are going to play each other in the playoffs, as it'll be a back and forth fight. But again, the Brees was dominant the postseason that year. He was just really good. The Dolphins also beat the Patriots earlier in the year when they hosted them. And the Patriots, remember, over the last several years with Brady, always seemed to struggle when they visited the Dolphins. So I think that's going to continue as the Patriots will lose to the Dolphins, which then sets up a wild AFC championship. Colts and Dolphins, Peyton and Brees, 2 weeks beforehand they would play each other in the Super Bowl in real life. Here they are playing the AFC championship, as these two play each other early in the year and the Colts barely beat them. And remember the Jets, when the Colts played them in the AFC championship, put up a good fight against them until the Colts took over in the second half. The Dolphins are going to put up a much harder fight though too, as Brees is probably going to cook that defense. It'll probably be a high-scoring game back and forth, but seeing how it went, I think I will trust the Dolphins to get the victory. And then, Super Bowl 44. Thanks to the Saints being out of the way, the Packers now make the Super Bowl, as the Dolphins will become the first team to host the Super Bowl. How about that? Brees making the Super Bowl just like he did in real life. However, he's going to have a tough task come up ahead, as he's going to go up against one of the best QBs in the league that year, Aaron Rodgers, and he's got to go up against an even better defense too in the Packers. And they didn't play each other this year, but I can see he's going back and forth. But this time around, I think I trust the Packers with Rodgers, who is better than Brees, and I trust their defense more than the Dolphins. So I think, despite the home field advantage, I think I'm going to pick the Packers instead to get this to prevent the repeat. After falling short of the repeat the year before, the Dolphins hope to get back into winning the Super Bowl this year. Unfortunately, Brees would have a pretty big step back this year, as he threw a lot of interceptions and such. And that would actually cost the Dolphins, as they would regress to 11-5. Then we take a look at the Saints, and finally, for the first time in his career, Vince Young would finally have a good season, as he had a pretty good touchdown to interception ratio. And with that, if anything, if Vince Young played a full season, because he missed like the second half of the year, he might have had a better season overall than Drew Brees, because he wouldn't have had so many interceptions. So because of that, the Saints improved to 11-5. And I don't think I need to say anything about the Pennington-led Vikings and the Favre-led Titans. So in the updated 2010 stands in the NFC, the Eagles move up to the number 2 seed. The Bears fall to the 3rd seed. As the Saints still make the playoffs, but the Buccaneers now make the playoffs as the 6th seed. Meanwhile, in the AFC, nothing changes, but yikes. 11-5, and the Dolphins still don't make the playoffs. Jeez. And now with the Packers out of the way, the Super Bowl is now the Steelers and the Falcons. As these two played each other early in the year without Big Ben, remember, and the Steelers won that in a defensive struggle in overtime. But we saw what happened in the Super Bowl when they faced an elite quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. He torched that #1 defense. With Matt Ryan now, I think that would be just the same thing. So I think the Falcons would win the Super Bowl. So now in 2011, after falling short of the playoffs last year, Drew Brees and the Dolphins, with that really good defense. I think they had a top 10 defense in 2011, despite starting off 0-7. And Brees having one of his best seasons ever, throwing I think it was 46 touchdowns. The Dolphins have a massive, incredible season. Although they do struggle a little bit early on with that 0-6 start, although it won't be as bad. But once the second half of the year turns around, oh boy, they go on a roll. As they once again, though, finish 11-5, but they look terrifyingly good this time around. The Saints, however, are the exact opposite story, as Vince Young has not a very good year whatsoever, but thanks to their defense, they actually still managed to win a bunch of close games, so Saints regress to 10-6, but unlike the Dolphins, they don't look that good this time around. And the updated standings for 2011 in the NFC, it's the Falcons with the 3rd seed, as the Saints fall all the way down to the 6th seed, and the Lions move up to the 5th seed. In the AFC now, the Ravens have the #1 seed, the Patriots fall down to the #2 seed, the Chargers win the AFC West, the 4th seed, and the Dolphins barely sneak it in as the final seed. So the playoffs begin in the wildcard round as the Dolphins visit the Texans in their very first ever playoff game. These two played each other early in the year, and I can't remember who won. The Texans won in real life, but the Dolphins weren't that good then, so maybe with Brees they probably would win it. As the Texans in real life destroyed the Bengals, but now they're going to go up against a Dolphins team that is on a roll with an elite offense and defense. They might have blown out the Bengals, but I don't think they're going to blow out the Dolphins, as I think the Dolphins are going to easily get this victory. Then after that, they have to visit the #1 seeded Ravens, as the Ravens are going to have a tough task, though, because remember, Brees struggled against the 49ers in real-life divisional round until he cooked in the 4th quarter despite the loss, as he put up 4 touchdowns. The Ravens, remember, barely beat a struggling Texans team with TJ Yates as their starter, who threw 3 interceptions, I think, in that game. So now they're going to have to go up against a team with just as good of a defense, with a much better quarterback. Yeah, I think the results are obvious. I think the Dolphins are going to go up to Baltimore and once again beat the Ravens, which sets up the AFC Championship, as the Dolphins will have to visit the Patriots. The second time in the playoffs, Brees and Brady face each other. Now remember, the Patriots struggled when they hosted the Ravens in real life. Brady played horrible in that game, yet they still won. But again, just like with the Ravens earlier, now they gotta go up against a team with just as good of a defense, and now a much superior quarterback. Again, I think the results are obvious. I'm gonna pick the Dolphins to get this one. And with the Giants out of the way, the Packers face the Dolphins once again in the Super Bowl, the rematch of 2 years later, as the Packers trying to get revenge after falling short the year before and not make the playoffs. Now the Dolphins are trying to get their 2nd title in 4 years, as this would be a back and forth game, as it's going to be one of the best offenses in the league. However, the Packers have one major weakness that the Dolphins don't have. They have no defense, whereas the Dolphins have a top 10 defense. And we saw what happened to the Packers in the playoffs when they faced a really good defense. They got crushed. So I think the Dolphins this time around would convincingly get this victory, and they will win the Super Bowl to get their 2nd title in 4 years. Alright, now before we begin the 2012 season, we have another thing we have to fill in, and that is Ryan Tannehill. He went to the Dolphins in the real-life draft, but why would the Dolphins draft him when they got Brees, and they just won the Super Bowl? Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, so he's going to have to go somewhere else. And I had to look around, think of where he could go, and I decided there's one team out there right now that badly needs a quarterback. And that team would be the Cardinals, as the Cardinals would now draft him instead. So now we're into 2012, as the Dolphins, after making a Super Bowl last year, look to try and repeat, which they fell short a few years ago. Brees has a little bit of a step down with his interceptions, but he still has an incredible year as the Dolphins once again go 13-3. Meanwhile, for the Saints, Vince Young absolutely sucks once again. After 3 years of solid success, they completely collapsed once again as they finished 4-12. Meanwhile, the Cardinals of Ryan Tannehill, they struggle, of course, as he wasn't really that good and much better than the Cardinals quarterbacks that year, as they end up regressing to 5-10-1. So in the updated standings in 2012, in the NFC, the Seahawks move up to win the NFC West as the number 2 seed, and the 49ers fall down to the 5th seed. In the AFC, the Dolphins now move up and make the playoffs as the number 1 seed. The Broncos fall to the 2 seed, and the Patriots fall all the way down to the 5th seed. So in the division around the AFC side, the Dolphins host the Ravens. Third time they play each other in the playoffs, as the Ravens look to try and make another Super Bowl to give it for Ray Lewis before he retires. But just like with the Broncos, they're going to have a tough task if they face the Dolphins, who are about the same probably with Brees there. This game would go back and forth, but I think Brees won't make the same mistakes as Peyton did. And I think if I looked at their stats, the Dolphins defense maybe was still better, but it's a pretty close call between them and the Broncos. But I think in the end, the Dolphins would hold on in a close game to get the victory. Speaking of the Broncos, the AFC Championship is now the Broncos visiting the Dolphins, as Peyton and Brees once again playing each other in the AFC Championship on a different team this time around. As this would be one hell of a game. It would go back and forth, but in the end, I still trust the Dolphins with Brees to get this, as they are going to get the win. And the Super Bowl is now the Seahawks and the Dolphins, as the Dolphins are going to try and repeat, which they fell short of a few years ago. But they're going to have to face one major challenge against the almighty Seahawks. As remember, at the end of 2012, they were on a roll, only barely getting stopped by the Falcons, for crying out loud. That's how close it was. As they're going to have to go up against, the Dolphins are going to go up against the number 1 defense in the league, explosive offense. Man, a very scary team. And even though they did beat them earlier in the year, they were the last team to beat the Seahawks before they went on their roll. And it's going to be a tough one, but I think the Seahawks are going to keep the momentum going, and they're going to beat the Dolphins to prevent the repeat once again. Before we get into the 2013 season, we got to get to another thing involving the 2013 draft, and that's Geno Smith. Now, of course, in real life, the Jets draft him in the second round, but there's one team that will aggressively get him in the first round. That's the Saints. Yep, they finally are done with Vince Young, and they desperately need a quarterback, so they reach deep and draft Geno Smith. Now, what will the Jets do? Well, they still have Geno Smith for this year, until, of course, he suffers this season-ending injury early in the year, but that's what they're going to stick with. So after falling short of the Super Bowl in 2012, the Dolphins tried to make it back, as once again, elite offense and elite defense does the job, as they go 13-3 once again. Meanwhile, the Saints with Geno Smith, he plays horribly. He was a horrible quarterback that year. But the Saints did have an elite defense that year, so it somewhat helps them even out a little bit, as they do improve to 6-10. Meanwhile, the Cardinals with Tannehill in his second year, he plays better, and the Cardinals do improve as they go to 10-6. And of course, the Jets, well, they don't have Mark Sanchez, remember, because he suffered a season-ending injury. But now they don't have Geno Smith, so they have to rely on the backup, which, on the one hand, you would think that would make it better for the Jets, because Geno Smith was so horrendously bad in 2013 that the Jets might actually do better with him not being there. Well, I think their quarterback would probably be better than how Smith played. The thing is, Smith in a bunch of the games actually played good, which the backup doesn't. So because of that, the Jets actually regress to 3-13. They do worse with better QB play. That's insane. And I almost forgot to mention this too, since the Cardinals have Tannehill, they have no reason to trade for Carson Palmer, so he sticks with the Raiders for another year. As he's like all over the place. He had 24 touchdowns that year, but he also had 22 picks, as the Raiders still do improve at 6-10 though. So in the updated 2013 standings, in the NFC, it's the 49ers that now have the number 1 seed, as the Seahawks fall to the 5th seed, and the Cardinals now make the playoffs as the 6th seed. In the AFC, the Dolphins move up to the number 1 seed, the Broncos fall to the 2 seed, and the Patriots fall to the 5th seed, and the Chiefs fall to the 6th seed. So the divisional round, the Chiefs would visit the Dolphins, as Brees kind of struggled in the divisional round that year, remember? And he's going to probably do a little bit of struggling too because the Chiefs' defense was good, although it wasn't Seahawks level good. But I think in the end, the Dolphins would hold on to get it. And the AFC Championship would once again, for the third time, be Peyton Manning against Drew Brees in the AFC Championship as the Broncos once again visit the Dolphins. Two of the best offenses in the league, with one of them being the greatest offense of all time going at it. I think this game, of course, would go back and forth, but once again, I have to trust the Dolphins' defense because the Broncos don't really have much of a defense this time around, and Drew Brees, so I think once again, the Dolphins will get the victory. And the Super Bowl is once again the Seahawks and the Dolphins, a rematch. First time since the 1992 and 1993 Super Bowl consecutive rematches, as the Dolphins become the first team since the 1990-1992 Bills to make 3 straight Super Bowls as they try and get the revenge on the Seahawks. This time around, they're going to have a tough time as they're going up against the #1 defense once again, the Super Bowl. And we saw what happened in the real-life Super Bowl. Now, of course, remember, the Brees did face the Seahawks that year in the playoffs, and he played mid. But comparing to Colin Kaepernick and Peyton Manning, he played superior compared to those two players, and he still lost. And we saw what happened in the Super Bowl when the Seahawks destroyed the Broncos. Now, I think the Seahawks are still going to win. Probably win very convincingly like they did the year before. I don't think it's going to be a 43-8 blowout because Brees, I don't think, is going to play as bad as Peyton. But I still think the Seahawks are going to convincingly get this victory. Like, the Seahawks obviously were just destined to win that game no matter what, how they played that night. Now, before we begin 2014, we got another thing to talk about first, and that is Carson Palmer, of course. He was on the Raiders for next year because the Cardinals didn't need him. But he has one more year left on his contract, and even though the Raiders did improve, they didn't think he was the future. So they decide to trade him. And instead of the Cardinals, they trade him to a very needy Jets team since they don't have a quarterback, and since they couldn't get a quarterback in the draft as well. So now we're back into 2014 as we take a look at the Dolphins. And for the first time in a really long time, the Dolphins look weak. Their defense, after like 5-6 years of dominance, is now falling apart. And it's got to rely on the offense more as Brees suffers a little bit of a nosedive in production this year. The Dolphins struggle as they end up finishing 8-8, their first non-winning season since 2007. Meanwhile, the Saints, of course, nothing's going their way as they continue to regress as they finish 3-13. Then we take a look at the Cardinals, because remember, at the first half of the year, Carson Palmer was having a good season, and the Cardinals were looking really good until he had his season-ending injury, and then they fell off a cliff after that. But they have Ryan Tannehill, and he had his best season at that point, and he played the entire year, so the Cardinals actually improved to 11-5. Meanwhile, for the Jets with Palmer, he plays pretty good. Unfortunately, though, they were still losing a lot of games even with him playing very good, and then he suffers his season-ending injury in the middle of the year, and the Jets fall off a cliff after that, as they instead only improved to 5-11. So in the updated 2014 standings, in the NFC, it's the Packers now with the #1 seed. As the Cowboys move up to the #2 seed, the Cardinals move up to the #3 seed, as the Eagles make the playoffs with the 5th seed. Meanwhile, in the AFC, the Steelers now move up to the #1 seed, the Patriots fall to the #3 seed, and the Chargers make the playoffs as the 6th seed. And with the Seahawks not making the playoffs, the Super Bowl now opens up to be the Packers and the Patriots, the Super Bowl we almost had too. As this would battle between two of the best teams in the league, as it would go back and forth. This time, though, Rodgers, of course, being the better quarterback than Russell Wilson, I don't think the Packers are going to give up their lead, and I think they would get like the Seahawks had, and I think the Packers would hold on to get the victory. So now we're going back to Carson Palmer going into the 2015 offseason. As, of course, the Jets, they went 5-11. They did play better. Palmer was playing good, but he suffered a season-ending injury. He was going to be 36 in 2015, and it just felt like he didn't really do enough to warrant staying, so they let him go as a free agent. And they had too high of a draft pick to get a quarterback, so instead they settled with real life, just getting Ryan Fitzpatrick like they did. Now, of course, Palmer, with some still good years left in him potentially, he ended up going to the one team that really badly needs a quarterback, the Saints. So maybe for the first time in a series, the Saints might actually have a good quarterback for once. So in 2015, the Dolphins, after struggling the previous year, tried to make a bounce back in 2015. Brees still has some of his struggles, but more importantly, the defense of the Dolphins still really isn't that good, and they did struggle in real life 2015, so the Dolphins once again struggle as they finish 8-8. Meanwhile, the Saints, with Carson Palmer, he has an incredibly amazing season. However, the Saints had one of the worst defenses probably in NFL history. That's how bad their defense was in 2015, and effectively, it was just like if Drew Brees was there, as the Saints improved to 7-9, wasting a good season Palmer had. Meanwhile, for the Cardinals, they still do good thanks to their good defense, but that's in despite of Ryan Tannehill having a struggling year as he doesn't play that really good, as they end up finishing 11-5 once again. So in the updated 2015 standings, in the NFC, the Vikings are now the number 2 seed, the Cardinals fall to the 3rd seed, and in the AFC, it's the Bengals that move up to the number 2 seed, the Patriots fall to the 3rd seed, and the Jets make the playoffs as the 6th seed. And with the Broncos missing out on the Patriots now play the Super Bowl against the Panthers in their rematch 12 years later, and we saw how the Panthers played in the Super Bowl against the Broncos, as they got to go up against an actual really good quarterback. Knowing the Patriots and their defense was still good, I think the Patriots would comfortably win this. So now in 2016, the Dolphins, finally after years of struggle, have a return to form as Brees has a great year and their defense isn't as bad, and the Dolphins improve to 10-6. Carson Palmer would have a struggle year against the Saints, but they still would improve as they would go to 9-7. And the Cardinals would struggle as Tannehill was having a bit of a good year until he had a season-ending injury, and the Cardinals would regress to 8-8. So in the updated 2016 standings, the Packers now have the number 3 seed as the Seahawks fall to the 4th seed, and the Redskins now make the playoffs as the 6th seed. In the AFC, nothing changes. And the Steelers would still host the Dolphins, but I still think the Steelers would win even with the Brees on the Dolphins. So nothing changes for the outcome of the Super Bowl. So in 2017, the Dolphins try to make it back to the playoffs. Brees has a little bit of a step back in production. He's not throwing as many interceptions, but he's not getting as many touchdowns either. And that comes back to hurt the Dolphins a bit as they actually regress to 9-7. Meanwhile, it's a weird year for Saints. On the one hand, Carson Palmer does not play good, and he suffers a season-ending injury halfway through the year, so they don't have a quarterback. But they draft so well defensively that they actually improve in a lot of ways too. But they end up regressing to 8-8, but it's still kind of up in the air for maybe a good year in the future for the Saints. Meanwhile, the Cardinals struggle with Ryan Tannehill missing the entire year. Effectively, half of the season is just like real life without Palmer, so not much change as they went 7-9. So in the updated 2017 standings, in the NFC, the Falcons move up to the 3rd seed, the Rams fall to the 4th seed, and the Lions make the playoffs at the 6th seed. In the AFC, the Titans stay at the 5th seed. The Ravens, however, make the playoffs at the 6th seed, but in the end, nothing changes the outcome of the Super Bowl. So now we go into the 2018 draft, as there's one quarterback we have to keep our eyes on, Josh Rosen. Now, the Cardinals are still going to stick with Tannehill despite missing last season and missing the rest of 2016. So they're not going to get him. So where is he going to go? Well, there's another team that really badly needs a quarterback. And sorry for you, Saints, it's you. With Palmer retired, you have no quarterback. He is now your quarterback. Hope you enjoy. And the Saints, with Josh Rosen's first year, he sucks. And the Saints really collapsed as they finished 5-10-1. Meanwhile, for the Cardinals, they also suck. Even with Tannehill playing better than Josh Rosen that year, nothing really changes for them as they finished 5-11. So now in the updated 2018 standings, in the NFC, the Rams move up to the number 1 seed, the Bears move up to the number 2 seed, the Falcons win the NFC South as the 4th seed, and in the AFC side, the Patriots are now the number 1 seed, as the Chiefs fall to the number 2 seed, and the Steelers make the playoffs as the 6th seed. And with the Saints out of the way, the Super Bowl is now the Patriots and the Bears. These two played each other early in the year, and the Patriots won a high-scoring game, stopping the Bears a few yards short on a Hail Mary catch from winning and pulling off the victory. Now, this game is going to be very odd. It was a defensive game, yes. But, of course, the Bears haven't played in the Super Bowl. I could think of, however, I think they could play potentially. Their defense was better than the Rams. They had the number 1 defense that year, so they probably would shut down Brady. But it all comes down to Mitchell Trubisky. Will he play good, or at least play good enough to get the victory? I mean, on the one hand, he didn't play in this game, so it's up in the air how he could play. But on the other hand, if Jared Goff, who is much superior than Trubisky, couldn't get the job done, how could Trubisky do it? I know, it sounds a little odd. This sounds like a very odd thing to say, but I think in this matchup, I think the Bears would get it in the rematch because Trubisky will do just enough, hopefully, to get the win. So I'm picking the Bears for this one. Alright, now we're in 2019 as Brees comes back for another year. However, the Dolphins struggled. They were horrible at the beginning of the year, remember? And he misses the first few games of the year with an injury. So that really puts the Dolphins in a massive hole. And I can still potentially see them going 0-7 like they did in real life. Like, I can see it happening. Now, Brees comes back. He plays good still, but by that point, the damage was largely done for the Dolphins as they regressed to 5-11, their worst season since 2007. Meanwhile, Josh Rosen and the Saints, it's really not working out. He sucks again as they improved, though, to 6-10 only because of their defense. So in the updated 2019 standings, in the NFC, the Eagles move up to the 3rd seed, as the Buccaneers now win the NFC South as the 4th seed. And the AFC, nothing changes. And I know for a fact the Super Bowl outcome remains the same. The Saints, well, I mean, record-wise, they do improve to 7-9, so another year of improvement, but with Rosen, you know they're just not going to do anything. That's all I can say. So now in the updated 2020 standings, in the NFC, the Seahawks move up to the number 2 seed. The Buccaneers win the NFC South as they're now the 3rd seed. The Cardinals now make it in as the 7th seed, and the Bears move up to the 6th seed. In the AFC, the Dolphins now get the number 5 seed and make the playoffs. The Ravens fall to the 6th seed, and the Browns fall to the 7th seed. Oof, Colts 11-5 and don't even make the playoffs still. Yikes. So the playoffs begin for the Dolphins as they have to visit the Titans. As this would be a tough game for the Dolphins that they're going up against a tough offense, but that offense won't really show up in the playoffs that year. But thankfully, Brees does. His last good game and his 2 touchdowns will be just enough for the Dolphins to hold on and get the victory in their first playoff win since 2013. But after that, though, they're going to have a tough task as they have to face the number 1 seed and the defending champion Chiefs. Now, luckily for them, Mahomes struggles in this game, and he gets knocked out during the middle of the second half. However, unfortunately for them, Brees, as we saw later on that day in real life with the Saints, he completely imploded in the second half, having one of the worst playoff games of his career with 3 interceptions, and that implosion single-handedly cost the Dolphins a chance to make the AFC Championship as the Chiefs hold on to win it. And with that wraps up the theory, as the Super Bowl outcome remains the same and the Brees retires. And with that, of course, Brees retires after the season, wrapping up this video. So, how much has changed with Brees being a Dolphin? Well, a lot of change, but we'll keep it simply to them 2 main teams, the Dolphins and the Saints. Brees now, of course, along with the Dolphins, have 2 Super Bowls. So good on Brees for that instead of 1 with the Saints. And the Dolphins would make 5 appearances, unlike with the Saints with just 1. So Brees did better in terms of Super Bowl appearances. The Dolphins did better, and both Brees also did better with the wins. So that's good on him. That's what happens when you have a good defense from 2008 to 2013. Something that the Saints, by and large, did not have in his career until it was too late near the end when they kept choking into 2010s. Meanwhile, the course for the Saints, not only a Super Bowl win, but a legacy of just misery. My goodness. Vince Young, Geno Smith, one great year with Carson Palmer before choking away because your defense is terrible. Now Josh Rosen. Who knows? Maybe they'll try and get a quarterback in the 2021 draft. But yeah, nothing but misery for the Saints. And all that could have been avoided if the Dolphins did not listen to their doctors and sign Brees. How much happy would the Dolphins be right now, and how much misery the Saints would be these last 20 years without Brees being their quarterback. But hey, it's just a theory, an NFL theory. Thanks for watching. I meant to say this at the beginning of the video. This theory was a very old one. I made this theory back in 2018. It's like one of my oldest theories, along with the Peyton Brady swap I did recently. I had to update it 3 times, of course, with the 2018 season edition add-on, then 2019, and then 2020. And then this last November, I had to remake the entire thing because I did not like how it ended up being. So that was a lot of work to remake everything, and it feels very good. So I hope y'all enjoy. That is, I think, the last of the 2 big theories coming up. I think the next few are like 5 years each, like I usually do. But I got a couple more theories. I might actually try and make some more slides for newer theories now that I got these 2 big ones done. Well, we'll see what happens in the future. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and see you all in the next theory someday in the future.